the time, we actually produce people who do science and technology at the very highest level. New York City has produced, I think, more Nobel laureates in science and technology than any other city. And this region is known for having been a leader in science and technology for a long time. So I'm delighted to introduce Harold Varmus. I've known Harold since our wives worked together for an alternative newspaper in the San Francisco Bay Area and rated candidates for city council. Harold grew up, though, in New York, went to school in Long Island, and then, typical of the way things happen to us, did not immediately proceed to go into science, but in fact got his undergraduate degree in English literature. And we were unfortunately all deprived of a great literary critic and probably high school English teacher when Harold went on to, despite a master's degree in English from Harvard, went on to actually Columbia University, became an MD, treated not a whole lot of patients, except for a stint in the Army, but went into medical research. And as they say, the rest is history. Harold and his partner Mike Bishop won the 1989 Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine. And as again often happens, a fine lab bench researcher wound up running a multi-billion-dollar organization, the National Institutes of Health, and then more recently came back to the New York area, where he's now the head of the Memorial Sloan Kettering Center. But I know Harold has a great appreciation for education, not only the education he received, but the education that the winners of the Sloan Awards tonight are delivering. I recall very early in the AIDS crisis, turning on the radio one day and hearing Harold being interviewed. It was shortly after we learned that there was a virus associated with the symptoms, which were known as AIDS. And I remember the narrator saying, well, it's a shame you scientists haven't gotten to work and come up with a vaccine. And Harold's response was, oh, but there is a vaccine. It's called education, and it can be highly effective in preventing the transmission of the HIV. So an understanding of the roles of education at all levels has been a hallmark of Harold's life and work, and I'm delighted to present Dr. Harold Varmus.
Well, thank you very much. You remember parts of my life that I've forgotten, but God, I sounded quite wise in my youth. First of all, I want to congratulate the winners on both sides of the table. And I took particular pleasure in reading the biographies that were supplied to us, and very moving stories and very impressive credentials, and no doubt there are more to be recipients next year. I also want to thank the Sloan Foundation for undertaking this very important initiative, and I will explain why in the course of 5 minutes of remarks about why what the Sloan Foundation is doing is so important here. We are at a critical time in education in the science, so-called the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Whether you believe in tests or not, the kinds of tests that are administered, our scores as a nation are not good. Students are clearly turning away from science and math at universities, just at a time when grounding of these subjects, in these subjects is so critical for our future as a nation. And even though we are in a difficult time economically, it's increasingly clear at a time like this what needs to be done, and it's clear that we need to move from a society that's becoming increasingly service-oriented to one that depends, as we have in the past, on our innovation. Indeed, if you look back to over 100 years ago, when the U.S. was suddenly growing its economy much more rapidly than the United Kingdom was, visitors from the UK frequently commented that one of the strengths of America, other than long working hours and good and better weather, was our educational system, and it's been well documented that by providing education to a large number of our people and education of a very high quality, we were overtaking the UK in the way that you might argue that China and other countries are beginning to overtake us, and we need to pay careful attention to this. Now, while these problems are becoming manifest, we also live at a time which I view as auspicious for doing something about the deficiencies in our educational system at the moment. First, we clearly have important leaders in Washington who care about this, and if you've listened either to President Obama or to our new Education Secretary, Arne Duncan, as I have, or listened to Mike Bloomberg and Joel Klein here in New York, you know that we have leaders who do see the profound connection between, first of all, science and many of the things that our society needs to confront, whether it's manufacturing practices or controlling climate change or improving health or worrying about the new sources of energy or improving the state of our environment. All of these things are closely linked to science and will only be an effective nation with respect to pursuing scientific and technological solutions if we train people to carry out the work that needs to be done to find those solutions. I, at the moment, have another job, a job in Washington as co-chair of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. This is a group that historically has been focused on problems of military competitiveness and security of various kinds, and in its current incarnation, thanks to President Obama's leadership, we are devoting increasing amounts of time to STEM education. Just last week, we heard from a dozen educators talking about new ideas and new initiatives to try to understand where the country should be investing to deal with the current educational crisis. And the very fact that 20 senior scientists who are mainly at universities and major research institutions are thinking hard about the problems of science and math education at the K through 12 and undergraduate levels is a sign of how seriously we're taking the current problems and how much we want to try to improve what can be done to educate the country's young. The other thing that makes the time seem auspicious is the energy that comes not just from government, but from non-governmental organizations. Witness the Sloan Foundation today, the Gates Foundation, the Carnegie Corporation, and many others, and many individual scientists at both the junior and senior levels who are concerned about and trying to do something to improve the status of teachers, the nature of the curriculum, and many other features that are inherent in the educational process. Now, many of the organizations I've mentioned, government, many non-governmental organizations, have written reports, and those reports are usually full of many worthwhile recommendations, few of which ever get actualized. But in every report, a key element is always held to be good teaching, not just building new buildings or fixing the curriculum, which in many cases can use fixing, but finding ways to attract the very best people into the educational process and rewarding them appropriately. So good teaching is always cited as the most important component of what we should be doing, but we're not always so adept at finding ways to make that happen. Now, one way, of course, is offering better salaries, and I'm a firm believer in much better salaries for teachers. I think that's one of the fundamental deficiencies in our educational systems. But clearly, that's not enough. And I'd like to mention 3 or 4 things we need to keep in mind as we raise the flag for having more effective teachers in our classrooms. One is better ways to be trained, especially in math and sciences. And those of you who are familiar with Math for America, Jim Simon's program, know that he's dedicated to that. When I lived in California, as I did for many years, Bruce Alberts, who subsequently became the president of the National Academy of Sciences.